Welcome to the Deeper Thinking podcast. There is a kind of silence that follows some victories, not the silence of absence, but the silence of something too large to name. You step forward, you cross the threshold, you are met with smiles, with approval, with the long-awaited affirmation that yes, this mattered. But something in you holds back, not out of fear, not entirely, and not out of shame, though shame once shaped your posture. What holds you is something more intricate, a tension that refuses translation, a fidelity to the unsaid. The moment asks for celebration, but you hesitate. You feel your fingers curl slightly, as if holding something invisible. The room shifts, people speak, you nod, you thank, but your nervous system is elsewhere, still in the past, still listening for the danger that once followed joy, a memory you can't quite see, but that lives in your breath, your spine, your instinct to defer. Because once, celebration led to exposure, and exposure led to rupture. So even when no danger is present, the body holds back. It remembers what meaning costs. You don't resist the moment because it lacks worth. You resist because it asks for a performance of certainty you do not feel. Because to celebrate would be to collapse something still unfolding into a shape too small. There is an ethic in that refusal, a care, a belief that not all truth arrives in language and not all presence wants to be seen. Some experiences insist on remaining incomplete, not as failure but as fidelity to what is still breathing. Some meanings cannot be extracted on demand. Some joys come late or sideways or not at all, and still they matter. Still they change you, not into a narrative but into something truer, slower, more quiet. You don't mark the moment, not because it is empty but because it is full. Too full to summarize, too honest to perform. You let it be. You let it breathe. You let it remain unclaimed, uncaptioned, unfinished, because some part of you knows the most real things are the ones you do not force into being known. There is a moment, days before the thing is achieved, when you imagine how it might feel. You picture your own face catching light. You rehearse a line, a glance, a small act of acknowledgement. You imagine your body softening into the moment, letting it land. But then it comes, and the feeling doesn't. Or it arrives distorted, fainter than expected, crooked at the edges. And instead of celebration, what rises is a quiet assessment. Is it safe to feel this? Some part of you doesn't trust what's been offered. The words are kind, the gesture sincere, but the nervous system hesitates. A familiar calculus sets in. What will this cost me? Who will turn colder? Who will feel left behind? You scan the room before you even know you're doing it. Before the joy can root, the vigilance arrives. You try to smile, but your posture is already preparing for withdrawal. This is not modesty. It's not dysfunction. It's pattern. Pattern learned through repetition. You remember being praised only to be punished. You remember standing out and then standing alone. You remember joy that made others uncomfortable. And so you learn. Stay small. Stay humble. Stay safe. The body remembers what the mind can't always say, and it doesn't need your permission to retreat. Still, you want to believe you've outgrown this. You've done the work, you've learned the words, you understand the theory. But the theory doesn't regulate your breath. It doesn't soften the spine. It doesn't rewrite the quiet rule etched into you years ago. Don't let them see too much. There are victories that feel like complications, wins that reopen old grief. You know this wasn't meant for you. Not in the eyes of the systems that shaped you. You know others were left behind, and you don't want your celebration to be their sorrow, so you mute yourself. You offer credit. You disappear into plural pronouns, not out of virtue, out of ache, out of unresolved loyalty to the people you were never supposed to outpace. And there's also this. What if this isn't the real win? What if this is just a step or a compromise or a well-disguised detour? You don't want to mark it with a story you'll have to later unwrite. You want to feel the thing fully, but only if it's true. And right now, it isn't yet, not fully, not clearly. So you wait. You stay inside the complexity. You let it unfold without naming it too soon. You trust the unsaid. There are places in the world where joy is carried differently, where to celebrate too openly is to invite scrutiny, envy, correction, where restraint is not repression but reverence, a way of keeping sacred what might otherwise be misunderstood. You grew up in one of these places, or near one, or inside someone who did. And so even now, long after you've left, the body rehearses the old choreography. It doesn't leap. It doesn't boast. It doesn't ask to be seen. You learn to smile without showing teeth, to thank without taking space, to succeed in a language that looks like deferral. This is not self-effacement. It is precision. A way of saying, I know what this means, but not all of it can be said aloud, and not all of it should be. Because sometimes joy is too complex to be translated, and sometimes it is safest when kept close. There are families that train this into the skin, where praise is rare, where ambition is seen as arrogance, where standing out risks being cast out. You learn to hide your glow so no one mistakes it for pride. You dim in advance. You downplay what matters. You learn to succeed in ways that don't make others uncomfortable. And after enough time, you don't even realize you're doing it. Celebration becomes foreign, not impossible, just unnatural. The muscles for it never quite formed. The rituals feel like costumes worn by others. When asked to mark the moment, you look around and wonder, for who? In what language? And what would be left of the truth after it's translated into a toast or post? Even in spaces that claim to welcome joy, there are rules. You can be proud, but not too proud. Grateful, but not critical. Visible, but not provocative. Celebration is tolerated when it is smooth, curated, harmless. But your story isn't harmless. Your joy was forged in tension, in loss, in contradictions no one wants printed on a balloon. To celebrate it would be to simplify it, and you refuse. This refusal is not bitterness. It is clarity. You want the meaning to arrive fully formed before you share it. You want to feel it without asking your body to perform it. You want to know it without having to prove it. That is the shape of your joy now. Unspoken, unfinished, unbranded. It exists, it breathes, but it will not be announced, not until it fits, not until it can carry the full weight of what it means. Sometimes you don't celebrate because the body hasn't yet come down. The event is over, the thing has been won, but your breath is still shallow, your jaw's still tight. You keep moving, not because there's more to do, but because slowing down might release something you're not ready to feel. Joy is not what arrives. What arrives is vigilance. And so the nervous system doesn't register triumph. It registers disruption. You tell yourself you'll celebrate later when it feels more real, more stable, more yours. But the later never comes, or if it does, it arrives quietly when no one is looking and doesn't ask to be named. This is not avoidance. This is how trauma shapes chronology. You move through joy like a guest in a house that isn't yours, polite, alert, ready to leave. The danger isn't in the moment, it's in what the moment echoes. You felt the floor drop before. You felt the shift from praise to resentment, from inclusion to exile, and your body remembers that too clearly to trust the light. Even if no one is punishing you now, some part of you still flinches as if they might. You brace gently, preemptively. The celebration asks you to relax, your system asks you to survive. There is also a grief that follows some wins, a cost that no one else saw you pay, a friend who drifted, a parent who didn't witness, a version of yourself that broke quietly along the way. You do not mark the win because it is entangled with loss. The silence isn't emptiness, it's allegiance. You're holding space for what didn't make it across the line. And there's the possibility, haunting, subtle, that the win isn't what you hoped it would be. You reached it, and nothing inside you shifted. You are still tired, still unsure, still waking up with questions you thought this would answer. The narrative of arrival collapses. You are left with reality. This thing was just a thing, no more magical than the moment before it. What now? You could pretend, you could post, you could recite the line about gratitude and growth, but that would be a lie, and not even a convincing one. So you stay quiet, not because you are ungrateful, but because you are faithful to the truth of your experience, to the gap between expectation and arrival, to the body that still hasn't come home. You don't celebrate, you breathe, you wait, you let the meaning find you on its own terms. The expectation to celebrate is itself a form of pressure, a subtle demand that you make your success visible, legible, palatable. The world wants proof, not just that you achieved, but that you felt something about it, that you're happy, that you're grateful, that you've transformed in a way others can admire. And when you don't offer that, when you don't perform the script, it unsettles people. They don't say it outright, but you feel it. the confusion, the mild disappointment, the gentle questions designed to pull a smile from you, as if joy must be expressed to be real. But what if your joy doesn't look like that? What if it's quiet? What if it's slow? What if it's wrapped in grief or guilt, or the ghost of someone who didn't get to cross this threshold with you? What if your joy doesn't rise on command, but lingers at the edge of your awareness, waiting for the space to unfold on its own timeline? You've seen what happens when people rush to celebrate. You've seen them perform certainty before it's real, attach meaning to moments that haven't settled. And later, when the glow fades and the complications surface, they're left with a story that no longer fits. You've learned not to do that. You've learned to wait, to protect the rawness of what's still forming. There's a kind of honesty in that. Not every moment needs to be narrated. Not every feeling needs to be made visible. Some experiences are too sacred for display. Some truths lose their weight the moment they're translated into language. You refuse not because you have nothing to say, but because you don't want to say something that isn't true yet. And maybe, too, you've grown suspicious of celebration itself. You've seen how often it's co-opted, how joy becomes a brand, success a signal, authenticity a commodity. You've watched people turn their milestones into content, their inner life into a feed. And you wonder, quietly, privately, what's left of the experience after it's been shared like that. So you choose to keep yours, not out of fear, but out of respect, for the complexity, for the uncertainty, for the small voice inside you that doesn't want to be flattened. Your refusal is not a lack, it's a boundary. It says, this belongs to me. It says, I will not offer my meaning for consumption. It says, I am still inside it, and that's enough. Eventually, you begin to notice how the silence itself becomes a kind of authorship, a form of narrative control, not by embellishment, but by restraint. You are not hiding, you are deciding. You are shaping the meaning of this moment, not through spectacle, but through what you choose not to reveal. In a world that asks for instant translation, instant legibility, you let this one remain untranslated. You trust that not every truth needs a witness to be real. This becomes its own philosophy, the ethics of withholding, not as denial, not as shame, but as discernment. You refuse the pressure to resolve the moment into a tidy arc. You refuse to call it a turning point or a breakthrough or evidence of your progress, because what if it's not? What if it's just a moment? What if it's still changing you in ways you don't yet understand? You no longer feel the need to announce things as they happen. You've seen how easily a performance becomes a mask, how quickly celebration can become a contract. Now that you've said it, now that you've shown it, you have to keep living as if it were true. But you want something more porous, more honest. You want to let the meaning arrive in its own time. Sometimes that meaning appears in the smallest movements, a breath you didn't hold, a room you enter without scanning for exit points, a moment of stillness that doesn't carry panic. These are not declarations. They are shifts, subtle, private, irreversible. They do not require applause. You notice others too who carry their joy like this, the ones who don't speak of it but are changed by it, the ones whose silence is not distance but depth. You feel kinship with them, a quiet recognition, a shared decision not to rush what is sacred. And there is something deeply human in that, a resistance to flattening, a refusal to turn the self into narrative product. You are not a story to be consumed. You are a living, breathing complexity. And this moment, whatever it is, does not owe anyone its final form. So you carry it lightly, carefully, without display, without conclusion, not because it isn't real, but because it is too real to be turned into anything else, too alive to be closed. And maybe that's all the celebration it needs, a quiet exhale, a space left open, a truth you don't explain. What's left after all this is not a conclusion, but a kind of gentle accumulation. The uncelebrated wins become a constellation, not marked, not posted, not spoken aloud, but felt. They line the interior like quiet stars. They do not glitter, they glow, softly, without audience, without architecture, without need. And this, maybe, is the most honest form of affirmation, one that resists the compulsion to turn every experience into a product. One that refuses to perform meaning before it is metabolized. In place of the celebration, there is a slow turning inward, a listening, a widening of the field, a trust that some things are real even when no one claps. It's not that joy is gone, it's that it has taken on a different shape. It arrives late, or in pieces, or not at all, and even that absence is allowed. This is the deeper lesson, that arrival is not a state to be reached, but a rhythm to be tuned to. It has no climax, no finality, just a slow becoming, a long unfolding, one that makes space for contradiction, complexity, and grace. You begin to see others differently too, those who don't cheer, who don't share, who don't shine. You recognize them not as lacking joy, but as carrying it differently. You notice the ones who light up only in quiet rooms, the ones who mark their milestones with silence, not because they are afraid, but because they are faithful to nuance, to grief, to all that cannot be told. You find yourself sitting across from someone who says you should be proud, and you feel the distance between their words and your truth. You smile, you nod, you say thank you, but inside something else is happening. You are not resisting the moment, you are protecting it, letting it stay unclosed, letting it keep unfolding in private time. And maybe you start to wonder, what would the world be like if we honored that kind of presence? If we made space for the celebration that doesn't declare itself? If we let people keep their meaning close to the skin instead of always asking them to display it? If we trusted the unshared to matter? There is no grand finish to this. No final insight that ties it together. Only the recognition that some of the most profound transformations don't seek attention. They arrive like breath, like rest, like the knowledge that you never had to prove anything at all. That the win was never about being seen, it was about surviving yourself, trusting the quiet, staying whole. So you carry it, not as spectacle, not as signal, but as a quiet, unmarked truth. You don't celebrate, not because there is nothing to feel, but because what you feel is too large to name, too alive to be closed. And some part of you knows the most real things don't end. They continue, quietly, in the dark, lighting the way forward. Until next time.
You've been listening to the Deeper Thinking podcast. Today's episode was narrated by Holly, our digital narrator, who helps bring our ideas to life. Thank you for your positive reviews on Apple Podcasts. Your reviews help keep us visible so others can discover and enjoy our content.